Alright folks, grab your popcorn because today, we've got a story that sounds like it came straight out of a movie, but it's not. It's about an ordinary taxi driver, a shiny suitcase, and a courtroom full of drama. Sounds crazy? Well, buckle up because this ride is about to get bumpy and, trust me, you don't want to miss it. The sound of a gavel echoed through the courtroom. There he was, Elias Warda. Man once known only as a humble taxi driver, now standing in chains before the law. His tired eyes held no greed, no malice, only the weight of injustice. The judge's gaze pierced him like a knife. The lawyers whispered and strangers stared as though he were guilty. But Elias knew the truth that would either set him free or destroy him forever. Days before that fateful trial, Elias was just another driver in the endless sea of city lights. For over 15 years, he had lived behind the wheel of his battered blue taxi. Each ride was a story, each passenger a mystery, yet Elias never asked for more than the simple dignity of honest work. He wasn't rich nor powerful, only a man who wanted to feed his family and sleep with a clear conscience. But destiny was waiting, and one night would change everything. Near midnight, he stopped outside a towering glass hotel. A man in an immaculate suit stepped inside, the scent of expensive cologne filling the cab. In his hand, a black leather briefcase, held not with ease but with caution, as though it carried something far too valuable. The man gave an address in the wealthiest part of the city. Elias drove on, unaware that this single ride would become the very reason he would soon stand in chains before a judge. As the taxi glided through the sleeping city, silence filled the car. The suited passenger barely spoke, his eyes fixed on the briefcase resting against his leg. Every now and then, Elias caught the man's reflection in the rearview mirror, tense, almost paranoid, as if he feared someone was following him. The streets grew narrower as they left the main road. Then, without warning, the man leaned forward and asked Elias to stop at a deserted corner. His voice was low, uneasy, but firm. Elias obeyed. The man paid the fare, stepped out with the briefcase in hand, and vanished into the shadows of an alleyway. For Elias, it was just another passenger. He thought nothing of it until hours later, when police sirens tore through the night. By dawn, Elias had already forgotten the suited passenger. To him, it was just another night of work. But as he rested outside a small diner with a cup of bitter coffee, flashing blue lights suddenly lit up the street. Two police officers approached, their tone sharp, their questions colder than the morning air. They asked about a missing briefcase, a briefcase last seen inside Elias's taxi. Elias's heart pounded as he realized they meant him. Within minutes, his words of protest were drowned out by the clink of handcuffs. At the station, the nightmare deepened. The missing passenger was nowhere to be found. But the police claimed that the wealthy man had reported his briefcase stolen. According to them, Elias was the last person seen with him. The interrogation room was suffocating. Under the dim light, officers bombarded Elias with questions, accusations, and threats. But he repeated the same truth: he had never touched the briefcase. His voice cracked, but his conviction did not. Still, the harder he defended himself, the guiltier he appeared. News spread quickly: a wealthy man missing, briefcase and a taxi driver accused of theft. It was the perfect scandal for headlines. Reporters swarmed the police station, cameras flashing, painting Elias as a criminal before the trial even began. At home, his wife and children wept in disbelief. The man they loved, the man who had worked day and night to provide, was now branded a thief. Elias, staring through the cold bars of a holding cell, whispered only one promise to himself: the truth will come out, it must. The courthouse was a fortress of marble and shadows where truth was supposed to shine, yet often struggled to survive. Elias Ward was led inside, wrists bound, his head bowed but spirit unbroken. Across the aisle sat the prosecutor, a man hungry for victory, clutching the wealthy passenger's statement like a weapon to them. Elias was already guilty. But on that very morning, a voice rose in his defense, his appointed lawyer, Clara Veron, a sharp-eyed attorney known for taking impossible cases The trial began with cold precision. Witnesses spoke, evidence was displayed, or rather, the lack of it. The only proof was the passenger's claim, his word against Elias's silence. The prosecutor painted Elias as a desperate man, a driver tempted by greed. Each sentence landed like a hammer, shaping him into a villain. But Clara countered. Her voice was firm, her questions sharp. She reminded the jury that no fingerprints, no video, no solid evidence tied Elias to the briefcase. She demanded, where is the passenger now? Why has he disappeared? For the first time, doubt stirred in the room. Despite Clara's defense, the pressure on Elias grew heavier. The media labeled him the taxi thief. Neighbors whispered friends turned their backs, and his children avoided school to escape the shame. Elias sat in his cell at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. With that passenger, the briefcase, the watch, the look in the man's eyes, something didn't add up. And then it struck him. The passenger had asked to stop in a deserted alley, but why? Elias clenched his fists. Somewhere in that alley lay the truth, if only someone would look for it. The morning sun filtered through the tall courthouse, windows casting sharp beams across the oak benches. Elias sat motionless, but there was a fire in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He leaned toward Clara and whispered about the alley, about the way his passenger had insisted they stop there instead of anywhere else. Clara's sharp mind caught the detail like a spark to dry tinder. She rose to her feet, her voice firm, requesting the judge's permission to examine the location. The prosecutor laughed under his breath, dismissing it as a desperate ploy, but the judge leaned forward, intrigued. After a pause heavy enough to silence the room, he granted Clara 24 hours to return with evidence. For Elias, it was the first glimpse of hope in weeks. That night, Clara retraced the steps Elias described. The alley was suffocatingly narrow, reeking of damp stone and rusting metal. Rats scurried away as she shone her flashlight across the uneven ground. She pressed her palm against the wall and noticed something: deep scratches etched into the bricks, long and jagged as though a heavy case had been dragged. Her heart quickened. She followed the marks until her beam of light revealed a torn scrap of black leather wedged beside a dumpster. Clara knelt, picking it up carefully. It was unmistakable, the corner of a briefcase ripped from its body. It wasn't enough to exonerate Elias yet, but it was proof that the story told against him was incomplete. The next day, Clara stormed into the courtroom with the evidence sealed in a plastic bag. She placed it on the defense table with deliberate force, drawing the attention of everyone in the chamber. This, she declared, holding up the torn leather, was found in the alley where my client was forced to stop. It suggests the victim left the taxi voluntarily, and that something else happened afterward. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The prosecutor slammed his desk, calling it irrelevant. But Clara pressed on, her voice sharp. If Elias truly stole the briefcase, why would part of it be left behind in that alley? Someone else had reason to take it. For the first time, the jury leaned forward, their eyes shifting from Elias to the prosecutor. The balance in the room was beginning to tilt. After the session adjourned, Clara sat in her cramped office, staring at the torn leather scrap under lamplight. The piece of evidence had shifted the atmosphere, but it wasn't enough to win. She needed someone, anyone who had seen the man in the suit after leaving Elias's taxi. As she flipped through her notes, a janitor entered quietly to empty the trash. He glanced at the file, then hesitated. That alley, he murmured, I clean near there sometimes. I saw a man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase that night. He wasn't alone, another figure followed him. Clara's pulse raced. A potential witness had appeared from the shadows of routine. The following morning, Clara requested the janitor to testify. The prosecutor scoffed, calling him unreliable and desperate for attention. But when the janitor stepped onto the stand, his weathered face told a different story, one of simple honesty. He described the alley, the suited man clutching the briefcase, and the second shadow that trailed him into the night. His voice shook, but his words painted a vivid image the jury couldn't ignore. For the first time, Elias saw jurors exchanging glances, not of suspicion, but of doubt. Doubt in the case against him. The prosecutor, red with anger, rose to his feet. He tried to tear the janitor's credibility apart, demanding dates, times, and impossible details. The old man's hands shook, his memory uncertain on small things. For a moment, it seemed the testimony would collapse. But Clara stepped in, her tone calm yet cutting. He may not recall the exact minute, but he remembers what he saw. "Two men, a briefcase, a shadow that did not belong to my client." Her words echoed across the chamber. Silence followed. The judge leaned back, stroking his chin. And Elias, his heart beat faster than ever. For the first time, he could feel the scales of justice tipping in his favor. That evening, Clara combed through old court records, determined to uncover what no one else dared to see. The janitor's testimony had opened a door, but the truth lay deeper. She searched case after case, name after name, until a chilling discovery froze her. The prosecutor, Gerald N., had a history of representing the very company rumored to employ the man in the dark suit, a company with whispers of money laundering and disappearances. Clara's hands trembled. This wasn't just about Elias anymore. It was about a web of corruption stretching far beyond a single briefcase. The next day in court, Clara's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She presented documents linking Gerald and the prosecutor himself to the company tied to the missing passenger. The chamber erupted, gasps echoed. The judge demanded silence, his gavel striking with force. Gerald's face flushed crimson, his words stumbling as he tried to dismiss the evidence as irrelevant. But the jurors leaned forward, eyes wide as Clara's words painted a portrait of betrayal. The man who accuses my client may himself have ties to the crime. Gerald fought back with venom, his voice rising, accusing Clara of fabrication, of desperation. Yet his fury only revealed cracks in his armor. The judge narrowed his eyes, taking in the spectacle. Meanwhile, Elias sat frozen, his pulse roaring in his ears. For the first time since his arrest, he felt the tide of the courtroom shifting. Not against him, but against the very man who had sworn to destroy him. Clara, steady as stone, leaned closer to the jury. This is not only about a briefcase. It's about justice corrupted from within. And today you have the power to set it right. The courtroom fell into a tense hush. The judge, his gavel resting in one hand, spoke with gravity. This case has revealed shadows far darker than we imagined. The evidence against the defendant has crumbled while the credibility of the prosecution has been shaken. Elias gripped the edge of the table, his breath caught in his chest. Every second felt like an eternity. The jurors filed out to deliberate, their faces unreadable. Minutes dragged like hours. When they finally returned, the foreman stood, voice steady yet heavy with consequence. "We find the defendant not guilty." Elias collapsed into his seat, tears flooding his eyes as the words echoed in his ears. Clara placed a steady hand on his shoulder, her expression a rare smile of triumph. The gallery erupted, some in applause, others in outrage, but none louder than Elias's silent gratitude. For a man once branded a thief, freedom tasted sharper than any dream. He walked out of the courthouse not as a criminal, but as a survivor of injustice. Above the marble steps, Elias turned his face to the sky and whispered, "The truth won." And for the first time in years, he believed tomorrow might hold something brighter. Injustice can strike anyone, even the most ordinary among us. Elias's story is a reminder that truth may bend under the weight of lies, but it does not break. With courage, persistence, and the right allies, even the silenced can find their voice again. Justice, no matter how delayed, is worth the fight. And if you believe in stories that uncover truth and resilience, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more.